Well, yeah, that's awesome. Thank you, obviously, everyone for coming on. I think we can make a start, and I will try and do my best to open mask and let people in as well as talk. But never very easy, obviously, for us guys. So, let's say thank you very much for giving up some time. Trust that it's a useful webinar. We have tried to keep it very much focused on the South Coast, and Nella very kindly joined us to obviously bring a lot of experience in the area, and also joined by colleague Wyatt from Spectrum. So make a bit of a move. I'll let Nella obviously introduce herself further, but we're passing over to her to give a bit of an overview from property side, and then Wyatt and myself try and give a bit more from the workplace strategy element. Very much be great to see any questions, try and keep the whole webinar as relevant as we can. So if people were able to just pop those into the chat, that would be ideal, or obviously feel free to unmute at the end. Good, thank you. I'll pass over to Nella.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. This is my first live stream webinar, and I really hope that the IT does not fail me. So the future of offices has received a lot of attention in the media, and it's been heavily debated by businesses across the globe. We've all been weathering the storm for the last year and have witnessed disruptions throughout the economies, businesses, and communities worldwide. But the good news for the South Coast is that there appears to be a little light at the end of the tunnel, and many employees and businesses are eager to return to the office. And despite lockdown, we've seen an increase of office inquiries throughout the region from 1,000 square feet up to 30,000 square feet from both businesses that are expanding and contracting in their footprint. Months of working remotely has had many of us yearning for that social interaction with our colleagues, friends, and clients. But yes, don't get me wrong, I love spending every single day with my family, but it does feel a little bit like Groundhog Day. And whilst the new ways of working has its upsides, and many businesses have found that their productivity levels have increased, there is nothing that can replace that face-to-face meeting, conversation around the coffee machine, and impromptu meetings where we can bounce ideas off each other. Reliable IT and quiet space was also high on people's agendas. The golden days of control-based management came to an end last March, and working from home has made many businesses realize that they do not need to operate as they did pre-COVID. The new ways of working is compelling many businesses to acknowledge what is vital and eliminate tasks or projects which waste time and resources in an organization. For those that are fearful about returning back to the office, the leaders will also need to have this in mind, because there will be an equal battle to support the extroverts and the introverts. There's been a number of studies carried out, and majority state, sorry, next slide, Josh. Thank you. Majority state that employees want to work from an office 3 days a week and 2 days from home or anywhere of their choosing. But when employees say that they want to go back to work 3 days a week, this is more from a collaborative point of view, and it's not about being chained to the desk 9 to 5. The culture change and management style of a business will seriously have to adapt in order to attract the right skill set for their business. Several businesses are now reassessing their real estate requirements to accommodate this new hybrid working for when we're allowed to go back into an office. For the forward-thinking businesses, it will certainly be a different working environment to what we've typically been used to, which Josh and Wyatt will cover a little bit later. Next slide. Businesses are greeted with lots of questions. Do they need to be in more flexible options? Do they need to mobilize quickly and have everything ready to go? Or is there a benefit of creating a bespoke workplace where they can create a thriving culture for their employees? Alternatively, do they actually really need an office? And working from anywhere in the world is just as sustainable, whether this is from home, a cafe, or co-working space. So one thing that is really apparent is the health and well-being for individuals. This is currently driving the change, and businesses are exploring ways to best serve their employees. The war for talent is intensifying, and employees are really faced where the situation whereby location and cost is no longer the most important thing, particularly if they can't attract the right skill set. We've seen an influx of businesses explore our region from major hubs to reduce the need for people to commute, but to main collaboration. So how many of you miss the commute to work? Should have a poll here. Is the poll there popping up? So if you can just have quickly enter this poll. Or how many of you want a work-life balance? Because on average, people have got 2 hours back to invest in themselves or their family. I saw one post that a person was saving between 700 to 800 a month on traveling costs, although I suspect that their online purchases have also gone up. But on the flip side, people can't switch off and are having to work longer hours and are looking forward to striking that balance. Next slide. When we reflect on the evolution of offices from cellular offices to open plan with rows and rows of desks, it's likely that the future of offices will be a hybrid model and will be heavily focused on multi-purpose space that can be used for informal meetings, events, team engagement areas. And it will be important for businesses to create a bespoke work environment that meets their business culture based on their employees' needs. So many businesses are struggling to understand the different options available, whilst having to deal with their own issues on keeping their business running, whilst keeping their employees happy. So I'll cover a quick high-level view as we will cover the pros and cons of each in our next webinar. But selecting a space that works for you and your business and that provides the level of flexibility you require is going to become more and more important. So what are the different types of office space that an occupier can consider? You have two main categories: office, conventional office, and flex space. But within these categories, you have different specifications to consider. So you have shell and core, Cat A plus Cat B, plug and play. Then you've got the flex space, which is service offices, co-working, and then home working. So typically on the South Coast, landlords have been providing conventional office space with a Cat A finish, offering a blank canvas for occupiers to come in and do their fit out. However, landlords that are looking to reduce their building void and secure tenants more quickly have been installing fit out to attract a wide range of prospective tenants. Particularly following the boom in the co-working market, landlords are trying to find new ways to attract and secure tenants. But despite lockdown, we're seeing a lot more optimism in the market, and there are a number of businesses that are seeking to take space within the next 6 months. So fitted space can provide a very quick solution for tenants. So as mentioned, conventional offices has been heavily debated, but for businesses that are seeking to be cutting edge and attract the best talent for their industry, are using real estate to create culture where their employees want to come to work. For businesses that are seeking more flexibility in terms of their term commitments, managed solutions seem to be very attractive. And typically on the South Coast, we are seeing 10-year commitments with a break at the 5th year, or a 5-year lease with a break at the 3rd year. As we talk about the evolution of conventional offices, the flex model is also evolving from service offices to co-working spaces. On the South Coast, we're finding more service office operators explore and acquire offices between 10,000 square feet to 25,000 square feet to provide a more flex space for tenants. And flex space is great for entrepreneurs like myself, SMEs, startups, growing companies, and companies that are carrying out project work. So as businesses have discovered that they do not need to be wedded to a location, we will see more corporates take regional hubs, either a smaller office or co-working facilities outside of London and major cities, to provide their employees a better work-life balance, which also is focusing on collaboration and engagement in the office. What will be interesting will be the size mix we will see. So for example, your typical large HQ office, will they move out of London into our region and become the new HQ with smaller hubs in the region? Or will it be 50-50? There should be a poll coming up, which you hopefully will give us some insight. So either way, by having a regional office, this will help to reduce commuting and support employees' work-life balance. I've had a number of discussions with corporate clients on the South Coast to try and understand how they will adapt their office to meet the new ways of working. And for businesses that have been forced to work from home in the last year, there are very few that will continue this long term. We've all felt the pressures of lockdown, whether you're a parent juggling homeschooling and having to cram work. Sorry, next slide, Josh. So whether you're cramming work whilst your children are sleeping, or if you're living on your own and you're missing that connection with your colleagues around the coffee machine, or you're living in a flat share where everyone is working from home, so the only quiet area is in your bedroom, which you've already spent the last 12 hours in. The isolation and lack of variation has had its toll on many people's mental health and financial situations. Health and wellness are now at the forefront of this journey towards a post-COVID world. And this will be key for landlords and employers to have the end user in mind when considering office accommodation. Several surveys have asked employees what they want from their office when they return back to an office environment. And there was an understandably focus on the health and well-being and the outdoor areas. I guess many of us have been embracing our daily walks, running, or other outdoor activities. And the health and productivity benefits of being able to enjoy nature is huge. Luckily for the South Coast, we are blessed with hundreds of acres of green space and 2 national parks. So building wellness reflects the impact that the physical workplace has on a person's physical and mental health. So for example, lighting, air quality, noise levels and materials used. Although green buildings have become a must-have for many owners and occupiers in the bigger cities, with green buildings addressing environmental sustainability, but the building health and wellness focus specifically on the human impact. The adoption of health and wellness building certifications such as Fitwell and Well Building Standards. Next slide, Josh. Has not been heavily adopted in the region, and only a handful that I'm aware of have been carried out. But the framework enhances transparency through providing clear wellness standards. So for corporate occupiers relocating out of major cities who have been used to this high level of certification, will anticipate that landlords and developers on the South Coast will have to up their game in order to attract these corporate occupiers. Given the severity of the pandemic, well buildings are no longer just a nice to have, but it's a key decision driver. COVID-19 has accelerated the need to build wellness into real estate, and it will become even more important in terms of access to matrix that tracks not only light and noise, but also building ventilation or air filtration and cleaning. PropTech and MedTech could be the next generation for smart buildings, which will allow operators to make real-time, data-driven decisions. The future of work is not new. Technology has enabled businesses to operate differently for a while. However, what is new is the transformational notion of work and how we work. The pandemic has accelerated digital transformation of businesses and brought individual health and well-being to the forefront as a critical priority. Employees expect a safe, productive, and a seamless experience wherever they work. The new hybrid ways of working will generate a very different way of working and performing in teams, especially for business leaders. So it would be important that their real estate is able to encourage the best out of employees. When a business is based in the same place, leading an organization can be tweaked on the run because we're all running together. But now that we're going alone, physically, emotionally, and mentally, short-term clarity about what we're doing and why we're doing it is even more important. So whilst the impact of COVID is yet to be fully realised, there is a reason to believe that the South Coast market is well placed to overcome the downturn. The diverse nature of the South Coast occupier base means it's not unduly exposed to any one industry. So you've got the defence, maritime and marine, finance, and tech, and the professional services. So many of them will be well placed to accommodate remote working platforms and will continue to operate by saving jobs in these sectors. Although some companies are likely to scale back expansion plans and hiring, they will still require some form of office. The shift to flex means investors and landlords are being forced to consider what it means for the space and how they ensure it remains relevant to deliver the best returns. But what is really clear is it's all about creating an experience that matches the needs of a client and a worker. So space that supports agile and collaborative working, which provides high quality service is key. Office operators are having to differentiate themselves through the services that they offer, whether it's the reception services, amenities, coffee shops, bars, gym facilities, yoga studios, or event space. The communal service on offer can be more compared to a hotel and the hospitality industry. So health and well-being is a key focus and has become as key as the financial health of an organisation. As more companies are now offering flexibility, their real estate strategy is being examined to a high degree to balance the bottom line. As we adopt more of a hybrid model where employees work in the office, homes, and in other places, office design that focus on communal space over individual workstations can help employees feel part of the community. It is clear that we are, of course, navigating the unknown, and it's easy to make bold claims of what the future will be like. But based on the endless studies that have been carried out, employees are driving the change, and whether you're a business owner, a manager, or a landlord, you have to listen to the end user, the employee, and embrace an adaptive approach that allows an office to learn right alongside the people inside. So next slide. The South Coast has the highest number of high-performing businesses in the UK outside of London, and it's known for its resilience and with strong growth, making it a stable location to invest. So when we explore the office rents throughout the UK, you have London in the West End at £101.50 per square foot, Manchester at £37.50 per square foot, Bristol at 37, Birmingham at 37. Then if you go down to the South Coast, Basingstoke at £28 per square foot, Southampton at 27 per square foot. And apparently this is setting a new headline rent because this deal is currently in solicitors' hands at the moment. Winchester at £25 per square foot, Bournemouth at 23, and Portsmouth at £21 per square foot. So as you can see, with our competing cities in the UK, the South Coast is significantly cheaper. So real estate cost is one of the most expensive costs on a company's balance sheet. Next slide. The pandemic has adjusted our perspective to being able to work from anywhere. So there are some huge cost savings to be had for those businesses that are reassessing their real estate needs, but there will be a key focus from leadership teams, and they will also have to question what is the true purpose of an office for their business. The answer will vary from company to company, and it will be very much about selecting the right type of environment for the business, whether it's a conventional office, flex space, or home working. So to finish and to highlight why the South Coast is the perfect location for businesses to start or relocate their business, I want to share a very quick video with you. Josh, it's on mute.
A diverse environment from the South Downs and the New Forest on our doorstep, to sailing on the Solent, the culture scenes, the festivals, the history, the shopping, and the endless restaurants and bars. You are never at a loss of things to do. It's regularly featured in the best place to live in the UK. Having worked here for almost 20 years, this is where I'm raising my family and where I see my business growing. I'm committed to encouraging businesses to take advantage of this incredible business landscape. I'm Nella Pang from Amiga RE, and I help support businesses along the South Coast navigate the complexities of commercial real estate. We have a wealth of diverse businesses from tech, digital, aerospace and defence, marine and maritime, and financial services. We're home to a number of international corporate brands to fast-growing SMEs, a thriving research community through its universities and research institutions. Not only is the South Coast one of the most successful economies in the UK, generating 70 billion, with a population of 2.1 million and buzzing with talent, the South Coast is a magnet for global players and dynamic startups. With 7 universities across the region, we're at no shortage of skilled workforce. Technology has changed the way companies and people function, creating a level playing field for us to compete globally. As businesses reassess their real estate requirements and search for regional hubs outside of London, we have the UK's #1 port for export in Southampton, worth 40 billion, as well as Poole and Portsmouth, connecting us to the rest of the world. The area is strategically positioned to London and mainland Europe, with 5 airports in close proximity and fast line trains connecting us to the rest of the UK. The South Coast is the place to invest.
Lovely, thank you, Nella. Yeah, excellent, very, obviously a great overview, and I'm sure lots of questions will come out of that. Don't think I've ever had to multitask quite so much in all my life. My wife would be very proud. Letting people on and off. So, as I say, great to see that, and obviously Wyatt's now got a bit of an overview from the actual office strategy side. Which obviously ties in very closely with what's been covered. So over to you, Wyatt.
Thank you, Josh. Thank you, Nella. Very interesting presentation there. I just wanted to talk a little bit around hybrid working, because it's obviously the flavour of the month at the moment. It seems to be what everyone's talking about. And I think it's clear that the workplace landscape is ever evolving, you know, it always has been, and in a certain sense it always will be. And so just maybe we need to have a little look back at how the workplace has evolved before, so we can understand why those decisions are made, and how that will help us make that next move. And ultimately, off the back of this, I'd like to just give a bit of an insight into how you could implement a hybrid working environment for your business. Just a very top end view, very summarised view of how that could be implemented to give you a flavour of what that's like. So looking at the very early offices and how they were structured, they were very cellular, and that was obviously mainly down to the lack of technological developments. So people tend to have either their own space with a partition around, or whether it was a room itself, but they'd have their own desk, usually their own storage there, their own PC or typewriters maybe back in the old days, but it was very much their own space. And that was quite inefficient compared to today's standards on square foot per person. So you'd be looking around about 250 square foot per person on that sort of model. But obviously, as technology advanced and the whole business world advanced and things sped up, really, everything is expected to happen much quicker. There became problems with that model, with lack of communication, and the businesses weren't agile enough to keep up with that pace of life. So that's really where we made, we saw a lot of business make a big move to open plan models. And obviously that just helped improve that communication, brought all the teams working together again, and just made everything happen a bit quicker within the business. And obviously alongside that, that saved a lot of real estate needs, requirements for businesses. So obviously that brought it down to around about 100 to 120 120 square foot per person. And obviously, again, the technology was advancing slowly, but obviously still was very fixed and not too mobile at that point. And the interesting thing when we moved to that model was it was very visual, the amount of space that was not being used at any one time in a business. It's very easy to see that with an open plan office. You can see the empty desks, and I think you usually find there's around about 20% of the desks are not being used at any one time. So when technology advanced to more of a mobile model, where we could have laptops and mobile phones, etc., network systems, so you could log in, it was much easier to go to a hot desking policy, where you could reduce the amount of desks and people just pitch up and use any that are free, and that obviously reduced your need for space again, down to around about 80 to 100 square foot per person. So another big move, and you can see a bit of a trend going there. Obviously the size of offices is reducing as technology advances and makes us become more agile. But I think at this point we started to realize that, you know, there's just not enough flexibility for staff. Although it's just giving them a little bit more, we could do so much more with the technology that we've got. We could be so much more agile, and that's where the activity-based working or agile working really came to the fore. With being able to move around so much more within a space using your technology and taking it with you, we were looking at, you know, spaces that are much more tailored to your individual activities. So just to have a quick look at what those could look like in an office and what we've seen previously on the next slide, Josh. So it's much more flexible. It's very different to your standard, you know, rows of desks and lots of people sitting in long lines. So it's you have a specific space that's tailored to an individual activity. So as you can see in the top left there, you've got a little place where you can pop out and take a private phone call. And it's obviously you're away from the noise, and it's more of a private space. And obviously next one along, you've got some quiet booths. So if you're wanting to do some deep focus work and you just don't want any distractions, you can go and put yourselves in there, and it's got acoustic properties as well, so it's going to reduce noise. Visual distractions are cut out as well with the high screens, and so obviously that's just going to improve your productivity on those activities. And then obviously if you wanted to take it that step further, you could have actual pods where you can close a door, go inside, or rooms that are set aside for that. You can see in the next picture along. And then obviously you've got the collaboration side of things as well. So it's not just people working in banks of desks, it's looking at different ways of doing meetings and more impromptu meetings. So having that third space where you can just pitch up, touch down, and work with some colleagues, as you can see, just making it much more flexible and a softer environment. And then obviously you've got the sort of more brainstorming and creative areas. So we're seeing a lot more whiteboards and interactive TVs being brought into environments to utilize ideas and just get them down on onto wall space and stuff, so you can actually see it more visually. So there's a lot of different environments coming up with this agile working. But this all looks very nice, but I can imagine a lot of you are thinking, well, you know, I've been stuck at home for the last 12 months. And what about that? And that is another model. So if we have a look on the next slide, Josh, it's, you know, we have heard a lot of companies saying, you know, we're actually going to abolish the office and we're going to go to a completely remote model. And that's, you know, a valid consideration, but obviously there are downsides to it. So obviously that's going to give you a massive saving on real estate if you do decide to end your office or reduce it. That's a given. And then obviously there's benefits to staff as well, in terms of reduced commuting costs and time as well. So I personally travel about an hour into the office, and having more time at home, not having to travel so much, you know, I gain a couple of hours back most days to be with the family, which is much appreciated. And obviously from a business point of view, you've got access to a much wider pool of talent to bring into your business, because you don't need to be limiting yourself just to people nearby to the office. You can go further afield, and obviously that increases the opportunities by a long way. But then on the downside, you're really reducing the amount of human interaction between your staff, which is really important. That is what builds the culture. That's what just keeps a team together and keeps the trust at that level. So if you're just cutting that down completely, you are going to see the culture deteriorate. And obviously working at home, it's going to have a knock-on effect with anxiety and mental health issues. It's, you know, we've seen a lot of it this year. People really struggled with it. So we do need to bear that in mind. And then obviously idea generation, which is the, you know, it's the lifeblood of any business, coming up with new ideas and how you're going to take your business forward. And that's, you rely on your team to come up with ideas for that. And it's not just one individual throwing ideas out, it's multiple people coming together and actually tailoring a great new solution. And that's where you need that culture, people working together. So if we move on to the next slide, Josh, what we have seen most people considering going forward is a balance between an agile working environment to support people while they're in the office, but also giving that option to have remote working. And it's different for each business, and it's very interesting the studies we've been doing with businesses to work out what sort of ratios of spaces they need, how different companies are, on how long they want to be in the office. Some people want to be in the office, you know, 4 or 5 days a week. Other people are saying, no, I only want to be in 1 day a week. So getting that right for your business is, you know, very, very important, because you could end up with a space that's not going to work very well if you don't do the legwork up at front and work out what the needs are. So if we could move on to the next slide, I'll just try and do a bit of an illustration and show you how we're seeing workplace landscapes changed within the office, and see what different environments we're going to be looking at. So typically, I'll try to break this down into some simple categorized activities. So social, collaborative, and individual being the main three. And this is typically how we used to see it, proportion across the office as a use of space. So typically around about 64% individual, and then a little bit of social there at 7%, and then some collaborative. But going forward, obviously, if we're going to be having a remote working solution, we're going to see a complete redistribution of those activities within the workplace. So we're going to need to adapt our workplace to suit the new activities that are happening there, because it's not just people sat at desks working on their own necessarily. It may be, but for a lot of businesses it won't be. So we need to make sure that we get it right. So on the next question there, Josh, sorry, the next slide. Is that coming through? Yeah. So sorry, you jumped to another one, I think. There we go. So on this, I've just done some assumptions based on some studies we've been doing with clients already, just to come up with a kind of a generic move to illustrate what it could be, but obviously you can't take these ratios away and apply it to your business necessarily. We need to do the legwork. But based on 57% of time being spent at home for employees and then 43% in the workplace, we should be able to see the following redistribution. Josh, if we jump onto the next one now. So as you can see, they've got the home and the office, and what activities or what proportion of time in each of those locations will be spent on what activities. So obviously it goes without saying, it makes sense to do most of your individual work at home if you can, because you're on your own. And it's obviously a very distraction-free space for most of us, not necessarily everyone. And then obviously you will have some collaborative with via VC technologies, etc. But then it's quite interesting to look at the office and how the distribution of activities has changed so drastically. So what was individual work is now collaborative. So you just need to really beef up the amount of space you have there for collaborative work. And obviously there's a big push on social too, because the team are not going to be together as often, but you need the team together to get that trust and that team spirit. So we're seeing a lot of people saying we need to really pump a lot more social time into when people are in the office, put a lot more emphasis on that to keep the team spirit together, keep the team working together. And also another really interesting point that we've had coming up is individual tasks that are done in the office now. For a lot of people, particularly in the sort of creative industries, they want spaces that are a lot more distraction free than they used to have in the office. So they want to be able to tuck themselves away more and have that quiet space. And I've actually experienced it myself because I've been working from home a lot, and I'm lucky enough to have a spare room that I can shut myself away in, so I don't have distractions too much at home. But going back into the office is actually quite a challenge. If I pop back into work and there's other people around, I struggle to focus. So I'd like to see much more quiet spaces for me to use while I'm doing that. And we've heard a lot of other companies saying the same. So obviously, as we said, that's just an illustration, bit of a generalistic view of the direction the offices are going. It is very bespoke to each individual business, and we've had some very, very different responses from companies. Some people saying that it's going to be sort of 70% in the office, down to some people saying it's more like 20%. So it's very important to do the calculations correctly. And what we're wanting to offer you today is a free form for staff. So obviously the first point is to work out what the capabilities of your staff are in terms of being able to work from home, and whether that's worked for them over the last few months. They've obviously had some good experience, and we need to work out whether that's going to actually be productive for your business, so we can weigh up all the options. So a couple of points on that. It's obviously anonymous, so you should be getting some fairly honest responses across the board, and obviously it's designed very much for companies who are looking to make that next step to increase productivity, potentially reduce real estate requirements for businesses. But it's not necessarily just reducing your real estate requirements. It may be if you're on a growth path and not having to invest in additional real estate as well. So it's just seeing what reductions we can make in that. But we'd take a good look at your current space and how your staff think it performs, also how their space at home performs, and whether that be suitable for the activities they need to be doing there, how many days they'd like to be in the office if they want to be there, and whether that's a full day, half day, couple of hours, and we get a really good data set to work from there to base our next set of studies on to take it through to the next stage. So obviously if you want to take advantage of it, just email myself or Josh and we'll set something up. We can have a bit of a chat around that as well, running through what that's all about. But that's all from me. Back over to you again, Josh, I think.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, thanks for that, Wyatt. As I say, it's been really interesting. I think it's quite an exciting time for our industry in just the level of change. And absolutely, this survey I think is so important. From our side, we're almost sort of forced into creating this, because like what it says, every business is different, and ultimately a working environment is designed to propel you forward, to support growth that may be there. So I'm just going to try and summarize a little bit. So whenever we are talking, and from what I try and do at some of the consultancy side alongside Wire, we say that there's three main pillars to implementing a hybrid or an agile workspace. So it's management, technology, and the working environment. So from a management side, I'm obviously not here to try and tell you on how to run a business in any way. But there are a couple of key things that need to be in place because ultimately, if they're not in place, everything else that may have been put or created won't really work. So you've got, from a reporting and communication side, are essential. So ensuring that that's increased. We're talking an increase on what was done kind of pre-COVID. There's a point around trust, I think, is essential. And I've obviously from what I do day to day, you need to be able to have a team that you can trust and empower to work in a remote setting. It's an essential part from anyone in a management position. If that's not there, ultimately the whole thing breaks down. And then obviously Wyatt's touched on the social interaction side. I was very much drawn. There was something I saw from Ben Francis from Gymshark, who spoke about their office and how they're investing, and he spoke about it as a cultural hub, which really resonated, I think, in terms of where we see it moving. It's somewhere where your staff come to be almost sort of imbibe the culture and the values. As I say, I think that's very well put. So technology, a lot of people, to be honest, have been kind of forced into getting this sorted, but it goes without saying it needs to be nailed down and running smoothly for it all to work, particularly looking at how that's integrated into the office setting. So, as I say, looking longer term, when people are obviously allowed back to the office, is looking at how you can then keep that level of communication and how you integrate it into maybe your different meeting settings or informal collaborative spaces. And then, the final one is looking at the workplace. So obviously we touched on that in quite a lot of depth, but I think the first point was set out. So, basing any layouts around data. So, some businesses are very heavy on collaborative work, whereas some have very little of it, and there's a lot of individual work done. It also comes down to a management stance. So some management styles may encourage this, some may not feel comfortable rolling it out. Some may look at a phased approach. So it's just looking at working out what's actually needed. Obviously, activity-led zones is a big topic in itself, and we'll probably go into in more detail later on in another webinar, but that's something kind of comes back to the agile side. Obviously, reviewing the space, particularly if you've got a lease coming up. Nella's, I'm sure there's others, but is very, very capable of helping you out. And the last point is very important, and I think it's actually been missed potentially by a few. Home working has never really been mainstream, and obviously in the last few months, I think I saw some stats, it went up to about 75% or something in April of staff are working from home. And there's not the level of regulation maybe as clearly set out as it has been in the past for home working arrangements. So everyone will be aware of the DSE regulations. And I think ultimately it's just setting out that is still applies to any of your staff who are working from home. You have a duty of care to your staff when they're in the office to provide a safe working environment, a work environment that doesn't impact their health. And that same duty of care applies whether they're at home. Arguably, where people have maybe been forced short term to work from home, you could get away with it, but longer term, if this is part of a strategy, it needs to be a serious consideration to make sure that people have got a correct home working setup, if that's encouraged. I guess a quick example is like the correct chair, making sure the screen's at the right height, that you're not just sat with a laptop on your dining room table with a dining room chair. It's a proper, essentially mini office that's created. So yeah, that was really a summary from me. Obviously moving on to some questions and answers, which is definitely be really good to get from people. Just before we jump straight into that, I just wanted to make people aware that we have got another 2 webinars booked in with Nella, that we're thankful that she's open for that, and we will send more details of them around. So jumping into a few questions. So I had a couple that were put across when people signed up. So I was just going to start with 1 or 2 of those, and then we'll jump straight into the ones that come into the chat. So the first one was around companies concerned about how home working may dilute brand identity. So great point. And Nella obviously touched on that. I think it's certainly going to be, it needs to be a conscious part of the strategy to spread or to include your brand identity in a home working setting. I think it ties in with the culture element, and it comes back from my thoughts to the management style, making sure that the culture is promoted by the management, the communication's increased. But it is going to be affected, and I think really that is one of, arguably maybe what a negative to encouraging home working, is it is going to be harder to maybe keep that brand identity, those values and culture. So I don't know, well, no, I've got quite a lot of questions, so I'll have to be quite quick, some of the answers. Second one we had was around insight into commercial landlords in London, have been giving tenants any reductions where offices are empty for so long. Nella, have you got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so in terms of where we are seeing the incentive levels, so typically on the South Coast, we've actually got a little bit of a lack of supply. We haven't had any new developments come forward. So our incentive levels haven't really changed too much. And like I mentioned, in terms of like the headline rents, we've seen Southampton headline rents increase quite significantly, up to £27. That's subject to it going through to legals. So in terms of London, they've actually been hit slightly harder than the South Coast, and they're definitely seeing an increase in rent incentives that are being offered. So for a straight 10-year lease, you can get probably between 24 to 27 months rent free, which is obviously a significant savings for many businesses. And then for a 5-year term, it could be anywhere between a 10 to 12 months rent incentives, but it's certainly a much more of a tenant market up in London.
Yeah, excellent, thank you. Very helpful. Wyatt, so there's a questions come in about what's the future for types of office layouts and environment and company footprint. You got any thoughts around that? I know you've obviously touched on it earlier.
Yeah, I mean, it's the big question at the moment, isn't it? And I think it's evident that if we're going for a hybrid layout, it's going to be much more collaborative. And I think I noticed a note coming into the chat from Libby about space, the collaborative space being a lot more space hungry, and that's absolutely right. So it's really important to get the ratios right in terms of how many seats in different areas, if you like, or how many people can use those spaces. But it's not necessarily going to be a straight swap in terms of square foot. But I think a lot of people are looking to reduce their square foot per person as a general trend as well. So it's going to go smaller but more collaborative. We're going to see a lot more sort of brand around spaces as well. As I say, if you're only in a couple of days in the office, you want to really make the most of getting that brand awareness to your staff while they're in, and also culture. So we're going to be seeing a lot more sort of wellness areas as well being brought in going forward.
And ultimately, if a company is considering home working, then it's got to make sense for them to relook at their office, because it doesn't make sense to have empty desks out there, does it? So I think, I guess, yeah, as you said, as you touched on, but if you're looking at home working, really the office has got to become part of that whole workplace strategy. That's good. And as I say, really appreciate questions coming in. That's awesome. So another question coming, probably Nella, a good one for you. Have you seen that companies have a wish to reduce office size when they're looking around, or are they reworking? What have your experience been on that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So as mentioned, there's been quite a lot of inquiries that have been circulated in the last few weeks, and there's, like I said, a lot of momentum and positivity about taking space. There's one occupier in particular that I'm aware of that has 110 employees, but they're actually going to only take space for 60 to 70 people. Because they have already done their kind of studies to try and understand actually how many people were going to be in the office at that one time. So they're really about making their business perform at a more efficient level. Like you say, there's no point taking accommodation and paying for a full rate for 110 people when actually only 60 to 70 people are going to be using it. So I think a lot of businesses are re-strategizing and thinking, can I take space as a co-working, or do I actually need to have a conventional lease, for example?
Very good. And just another quick question is there a general trend towards a shorter lease length, do you think?
It's all really dependent on the company. Again, you've got a lot of the bigger corporates that actually want their culture is their brand, and it's very key for their business to actually have that conventional lease where they can build their brand and get their teams in and build that engagement and create collaboration space. But for smaller businesses that are not necessarily so brand driven, they can actually operate within a flex environment. So they're probably looking more of a flexible leases. But actually the people that I've been discussing where it's 5,000 square feet or upwards, they are very much still taking longer lease terms, so a 5-year or a 10-year, whereas the smaller businesses that are looking to expand, they are taking more flexible lease terms.
Yeah, very good. And questions come in, again, probably good on Nella for you. What could you suggest to help a business that may be stuck in a longer lease? Is there anything that they could do?
Yeah, absolutely. So by undertaking a workplace strategy to understand what our your employees' needs are, we can then obviously go in and review your lease terms and see if there's an opportunity to either sublet the space, or essentially trying to sign the lease, or trying to discuss an agreement with the landlord where we might even surrender the lease and then relocate you to an alternative location which is fit for your business.
Yeah, very good. Okay. Right, I'm just trying to keep up with questions. There's a question about more details on the building standards, but I think we've got that booked in, haven't we, Nella, to go into a lot more detail on that on a future webinar.
Yeah, that's on the 27th of April, which will be covering the building wellness.
Yeah, very good. So I've got a question here on, do you feel that businesses may look to rent out space that they've got free? Is that something have you seen anything on that, Nella, at all? If they free up an area within their building, is that something that I'm assuming they could
No.
supplement on?
Oh, absolutely. It's about mitigating people's liabilities. Obviously, COVID has had an impact on quite a lot of people's businesses, whether they are contracting or expanding. So if you are contracting and you have realized, actually, I can free up 2,000 square feet, we will review the lease and see what the alienation clauses are, and see how we can best subdivide the space in order to try and relet it to another occupier, which ultimately will get some income for you.
Yeah, very good. Sorry, I'm trying to read both. So I had a question. Do you see that tools like room scanners to log when rooms and areas are really in use and not just being booked? So that's quite a good point. I think what you've looked into a little bit, haven't we, in terms of space utilization and some of the technology on making sure that space is occupied. Have you got any comments on that?
Yeah, it's a really interesting one. It's not something I know inside out, I must admit, but it's very valid consideration with, especially with hybrid working, when you're not actually sure, unless you go to a booking system, how many people you're going to be having in that space day to day. So that's really important, is just managing that so that the space doesn't become oversubscribed. And also individual areas as well, being able to book that out. And we've been looking at systems which obviously link straight into your standard calendar system, and you can book out specific rooms, but also if you're not there, you don't turn up for your meeting, but also automatically clear that and make it available for other people that are in the space. So it's just trying to make it as adaptable and agile as possible. And yes, the technology is out there to do that and deliver it. So.
Yeah, can I just add to that? We're seeing a lot of smart technology being introduced into buildings. So fob access, whether it's keyless, I think by having scanners that can actually monitor how much a meeting room is being used is going to be even more important, because it's about having the data to drive change within an organization. And certainly from a corporate level, there are definitely organizations that are monitoring this, because they're trying to adapt and learn as we go. So having that data is really key, and we're definitely going to see more and more of that come forward.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think from some of the work that we've been doing, it's great, obviously ongoing, because you carry out some of these studies, like we obviously put together this questionnaire, which is a great start. But a business does adapt and change and develop, and it's often not until people start using a new space that you really start to understand whether it's working. So, as you said, that technology, if a meeting room, for example, is in use a lot, or if it's not in use a lot, that's great data to be able to review in 3, 6 months, a year's time, and ensure that the office is a relevant tool, essentially, for the business to support growth. So yeah, let's say those questions. So another one here about outdoor space. Office users requesting outdoor space. Do you see that, Nella? Is that a key? I'm assuming that. I'm sure it is.
Yeah, absolutely. Particularly on the corporate level, health and wellness is very much on the forefront of their decision making. So creating, again, if your employee can go for a run at lunchtime, and there is outdoor facilities that can accommodate that, then certainly those properties that actually provide that, those will go quicker. And what is really interesting is actually when you're going on an office tour, there is, most of the time, there's actually a HR person that is now accompanying these tours, because they're thinking about what is best for their employees. Again, mental health has been all in the media, and so there's going to be a real need to try and capture that and eliminate that, particularly when we're going to go down this hybrid route. They want people to be in a thriving office.
Yeah, absolutely. I think ultimately the office is moving to something that's not just an overhead for a company. It's something that can actually encourage and is a key part of the overall business strategy. You've got to get that bit right to enable the future growth and to attract and retain people. Obviously, the key to the business. So, yes, that's a great point. So I said, trying to flick through. So, I had another great question put to you, Nella. Do you know many businesses have been seeking their employees' opinions on changes to the workspace and how it could look in the future? And I'm guessing in that process of looking at a new building, how involved are staff getting, do you think?
Oh, absolutely. Like employees' engagement is really critical. So I mentioned that I've had a number of conversations with corporates that are based on the South Coast about re-strategizing, and all the conversations that I've had is that they've sent their surveys to their employees. A lot of people actually sent their surveys 6 months ago, so lockdown 2. And it's been really interesting because once they've surveyed this time round, the kind of mental health and the social aspect, the percentages have increased. And there are a lot of people that actually want to get back into the office, whereas lockdown 2, they enjoyed being in. It was a novelty to be at home, a novelty not to have to commute. So it's really interesting, the time difference.
Yeah, no, thank you. That's really interesting. Got a good one here, Wyatt, for you. Do people prefer whiteboards over touchscreens? You often can't beat a good whiteboard, can you? But
Yeah, it's a bit of personal preference on that. I prefer whiteboards, but it's a bit of a pain having to record it again afterwards. Yeah, it's a very good question. I mean, I think ultimately it's just having that space available to have that session of brainstorming with your team or creative time.
yeah,
That's really, really important to have that, because that's obviously your idea generation for the business.
and that's
Yeah,
what,
it's technically a little more expensive, but it just integrates it into your system much quicker and easier.
yeah, that's where the office comes into its own, isn't it? Is where that creative element. So again, questions keep coming. So employees have a sense of being watched with occupancy tracking. Great question. I know it all kicked off with, I think, Microsoft, if I remember rightly, who are looking at introducing something. I think there's 2 points on that. First one, I would say it comes back to what we said a lot about getting the staff on board. Ultimately, if the staff understand where you're trying to go and what you're trying to achieve, that's more than half the battle. Like if they understand the vision there. The second point, again, I've got a fair understanding of what's out there, and I think there are options where it's more anonymous data. So it does depend. Obviously, some people look to integrate it into kind of checking employees in and out of building and things like that, which is obviously then tracking individuals. And obviously that's down to individual policies really. But I can understand how that can be quite contentious. So I don't know if that really answers it, but I think I would say that the key point is around keeping the staff involved and helping them understand and being open with the data. Nothing to hide from it, is there? No.
Yeah, absolutely. It's about building the trust. And I think leadership management strategies will have to change. And I think the golden days of controlled management ended last March. We've all been working from home. People, we've adapted to this new way of working. And I think going forward, if a partner, for example, is in 9 to 5, 5 days a week, then there will definitely be a feeling that their junior counterparts will have to be in at the same time. But actually, so it's about changing the strategy. You really need to understand what your employees want, and it's flexibility. They want a work-life balance. And so for companies that are forcing individuals to come in and work 9 to 5 and go back to the old way, I think that's where there'll be the downfall.
Yeah. No, absolutely. As we've touched on, I think it comes back to the office being something that's a key part of a business's strategy overall at a management level. It's not something that just gets put to a facilities or an estates team, obviously as important as they are. It's part of a much bigger strategy of retaining and attracting top talent. And you've got the question in the future of, if you don't offer this model and if you don't offer the flexibility, I think it will become a big part of recruitment, in coming months and years. But I haven't got, I think we've managed to cover a lot of the questions. Obviously, if anyone else has got a question, please feel free to shout out or pop that into the box.
If I could jump in, sorry, just as a random question, really, do you see the technology? I remember reading an article a few years ago about a German company that had an app that everybody had installed on their mobile phones. They could book hot desks. They could configure the nearby coffee machine to have their favorite drinks available, and they could order their drink from their mobile phone, that sort of thing. Do you see technologies like that becoming more mainstream, so you can actually do a more hybrid model where you get to know where you're going to sit, you can see where your co-workers are placing themselves, whether that's something that's becoming more mainstream or not?
I think in terms of the corporates that are up in London and the major cities around the globe, that is actually something that they have all heavily invested in. There is, I can't remember which building it is, I'll send it in the link, but there is a robot at one of the buildings in London where you can kind of go in and, like you say, you log in via an app. You can send a message to say, turn on the coffee machine, for example, and definitely prop tech and med tech will definitely come forward in terms of providing a more efficient way of working. Whether it's coming to our regions just yet will be another question, and it will be down to I guess the landlords and corporate occupiers having that foresight to introduce it.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great question. I think from what we've seen from the office side, that there's often these things start in London and then filter out. And I think what we've seen is that, what COVID has created a big shift, because a lot of things have been fast forwarded, maybe in the south, and probably pushed ahead much quicker. So I certainly see it's going to be, technology will certainly become more integrated and become more part of day-to-day life. But go on, John. Is there any more?
Yeah, I was just going to say thank you. Yeah, it's been a good session, and obviously as people move potentially more out of London into the regions, then the technology, that sort of way of working, will follow them.
Yeah, well, that's it. As I say, ultimately it's about how you can use. If something can help you use the office better, then it's got to make sense to look at it. But that's good. Thank you. As I say, if anyone else has got anything, feel free. We'll drop an email around so you've got everyone's details. But yeah, really appreciate everyone's time. Thank you very much. Is there any more questions anyone would like to put forward?
I think there was one in the chat box. Just we may have missed it on furniture leasing, which is a very good point actually, because obviously if you're on a lease term for the space, that is something we can offer. So if you wanted to spread the cost of works to that space, furniture within that space across it to match your lease term on the building, that is something we can offer.
That's fit out and furniture, isn't it? Well,
yes, that's right.
And we're also seeing a lot of landlords actually wrap this up into a deal. So they're offering a fully fitted out space, and then they're amortizing it over the lease length. And again, because the boom of the co-working environment, landlords are having to actually find new ways to offer the same sort of service.
yeah, no, that's really interesting. No, I think we've actually got a couple of clients we're talking to on that sort of service. So no, it's been great, and there's definitely been a lot of interest in the South Coast, hasn't there? Which is something we're all passionate about, particularly as a very nice little video.
Brilliant.
Good.
Okay.
Well, anything else? I think we can conclude. We will get a recording sent round, and as I say, our details. And yeah, hopefully it's been useful.
Thanks, guys.
Yep.
Thank you all. Have a good day.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.